Hi, and welcome to week 12. This week is all about hard surface and organic modeling and bitmap texturing. So, I'm keeping it a little bit simplified in the amount of information that's in the modules, but there's a lot in it. So, hard surface versus organic modeling. I have 3 sites for you to look at. Basically, all objects can be broken down into hard surface or organic objects. You'll read more about the definitions in here, but organic is generally more found in nature, whereas hard surface is man-made. There are always going to be some objects that are not obviously in just one category. Maybe they have a combination of the two. For instance, a couch. A couch is man-made. You know that we have the wooden form underneath that is very hard surface, straight edged, 90-degree angles, but then we have the batting, the cushioning, and the fabric on top that rounds everything out and makes it a little bit more organic. So it'll be up to you to determine what's hard surface and what's organic. Many of our modeling tools are going to be the same. We're going to use the same, we're dealing in four-sided polygons no matter which one. You're inserting edge loops in each one. Your edge flow matters, but we need to pay attention to the details and how we accomplish those. Hard surface, we have straighter angles. Your polygon size is going to stay more consistent. Organic, you're going to get into maybe those sculpting tools or soft select, really molding and forming your shapes. And that brings us to our next assignment. We're going to create a simple scene that includes one hard surface model and one organic model. I'm leaving this purposely wide open. If you'd like to just make sure your models are of each category, feel free to reach out. But I believe that you guys will be able to know the difference after reading about it. One requirement is that in your scene, you need to name your objects, and then after it, put an HS for hard surface or an O for organic. So if my scene's going to be a room that has a table and a teddy bear, I could put the teddy bear on the table in a corner of a room, create a nice scene, think about the angles, and do a nice render. But in my Maya file, it would just be table HS and teddy bear O. Now, you're going to need to apply texture to your hard surface model. You may also try to add texture to your organic model, but you may find that for the organic model, it's harder to get the textures to lay straight. So you could just do base color, kind of like what we did last week. So everything will be textured per se, but you're going to use bitmap, which we'll talk about today, on your hard surface model. Okay? Submit your Maya file, a render, and a rendered JPEG, TIFF, or Targa. You will also need to include a written paragraph discussing the differences you found in modeling the hard surface versus the organic model. This can be submitted as a document in the comments of the submission, however you would like. Due Sunday, 11:59 standard. And we've hit the end of the week. All right, so let's talk briefly about texturing. We talked about, looking at Lamberts and blends last class, but there's a lot more to it, okay? Bitmap textures are just your image type textures. So there are plenty of websites online to get 3D textures. One of my favorites is textures.com. If you guys have normally or before heard of cgtextures.com, it's the same site. You do have to create an account, but they have some free things. You can also just go to Google and look up, I just did a brick texture for the sake of things, and then just make sure copyright, all of that. So one thing with texture, when you are creating texture, you generally want to look up seamless. So what seamless means is that, let me just open up one of these real quick. So if I have this image, see how if I look at the side here, this brick is cut in half, and on the other side, that brick is cut in half. We have the grout over here and the grout over here. So imagine if this is a sheet of paper, and we curl that sheet of paper so that this edge touches this edge, you will not see a seam. They blend, which is really great, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's do grass texture is kind of the easiest to see. Now, of course, most of these are going to be seamless. Yeah, luckily throughout time they've made it kind of seamless. But, you know what, I'll just do grass image. This will show you a little bit further. All right, so, and I will teach you how to do this in a second, but I'm just showing my point. And it's grass, and I'll hit 6 on my keyboard to show it. So this looks cool, right? This is what a bitmap texture is, and we're taking a 2D image and putting it on a 3D space. Granted, this is just a plane, so it's kind of flat. But from here, all right, and to show my point, there's this editor here that we can use when you're getting more involved with your textures. But what we can do is actually scale these. So you can see now that our grass texture is repeated, and you can see we've got this kind of green mass over and over again, and you can see the line right down here where we have a seam. So what we can do is find textures that are seamless so that I can assign, I'll do my seamless brick texture. Well, look at that. This brick texture lied. It's not seamless. So, after all of that, this one shows my point even further. We can see the exact seam where this texture doesn't line up. So it becomes unrealistic, right? Our whole point is to, you know, kind of fake reality here, and everyone's going to realize right away if they walk up to a building and this is what it looks like. So make sure when you're finding your textures that you do a seamless brick texture. So let's see this one. Huzzah! There we go. Now we have an actual seamless brick texture. You can see Maya's kind of telling you this is where the seam is, but see how the bricks carry over. So this is a nice, crisp texture and seamless. Now, of course, because we have this repeating, kind of like in some of the other images, you can see some repeating factors. So a lot of times, again, we would go into Photoshop and kind of edit these to be more particular for whatever scene we're going for. But I don't expect you to do that for these assignments. I just want you guys to have some fun, including some realistic textures into your scene. So, hard surface versus organic modeling. Again, you're going to do some research on that, but let's say I end up with a table. I would expect at this point that you guys can create some pretty nice looking stuff. So really push what you are trying to do. I want to see you, all that you've learned throughout the term. We're getting towards the end of the term, which is really crazy. So show off what you are working with. But for the sake of time, let's say this is my table. Now, we looked at a texture on a plane. Okay, a plane is excuse me, basically a 2D surface, so we don't have any issues, right? Now, I know I wouldn't make this table brick, but you're going to notice some differences. So let me rewind for a second. Texturing in 3D. You are taking your 2D image and projecting it onto a 3D space. So we saw what that brick looked like on a plane, but let's look at what the brick looks like on a sphere. I'm just going to go to apply an existing material because I already have that brick material set, and here we go. Because it is seamless, it looks pretty nice, right? We do have some seaming and stretching, kind of pie piecing at the top, because that is the way the shape goes. So imagine, like a projector in a classroom, what this is doing is looking at the sphere, or sometimes I like to think about it as wrapping paper, and you are taking that 2D image and projecting it around. So it's coming from me, projecting on, so you can think of like the rectangle of the image, and it's wrapping around, and that's why you're getting this at the top, because the page is kind of stretching to fit and fill in these gaps. So let's see cylinder. So the cylinder, you can see it's stretching further, and it's actually giving a seam, but then, the top and the bottom look nice. Well, why is that? Because this is projecting from here. So this is looking good, but then it knows, well, I have to do something here, and so it's taking a small part of the texture and wrapping it around that way. Now, there are a few things that we can do to fix this, because this isn't going to fly as is. So what we can do is up at the top here we have UV. And then we have automatic, camera-based. There are a lot more options, but we're just going to kind of go over these basic ones here. Cylindrical. Well, I'm dealing with a cylinder. Let's see. So what this does is it knows that we're working with a cylindrical type object, so it projects it on the cylinder side. But now look at the top. Very stretched. Very, very stretched. So you would need to decide, well, are you keeping the tops? What's going on? But we can also do this in face mode. So I'm going to select all of these top faces. And because this is kind of a flat plane, right? It's circular, but it's flat, so I can do planar. But Jen, this doesn't look right. Well, look at, my planar is actually up and down instead of sideways. So if I look over in my attribute editor, what I need to do is rotate and scale. Make my projection height bigger. You can type in numbers, and you can see we can scale this up. So I probably scaled that up a little bit too big. And these don't have to go, you know, together. You can make them whatever shape you want. Okay, so you would try to match up whatever your side is. Now, all of that's fine and dandy, but Maya has introduced another option where we have UV automatic. Now what automatic does is, you see, it takes 6 viewing angles and projects your texture on based on all of those angles. So you can see it did my top, bottom, and the sides for me. Now it might not be perfect. You may find I have a seam here, but that's when you would kind of go in, and in a texturing course we teach you how to cut up the textures, how to sew them together, all that kind of stuff. Alright, so that was a lot, right? So let's try to break it down and simplify it a little bit for us. You will model your hard surface object, and then you can find, let's do a seamless wood texture. Check the licensing. Again, you can use different sites. I want let's see. Let's just try this one. Now it's a pretty small texture, so to get my whole table it's going to have to repeat. But right mouse click, assign new material. Now I haven't even gone over how to apply it yet. So what you're going to do is decide, do you want this to be shiny or matte? So just like we did before. Then instead of adding color, kind of like what we did before, what we can do is click on this checker box next to color. My Maya just froze. There we go. And then you're going to go to File, click this little folder here, and navigate to find your texture, your image. Oh, this didn't save right, and that's why. There we go. All right. Now, don't forget to hit 6 if you don't see anything to see your texture. But now what we can do is go to UV automatic. And there we have it. Now granted, this is a very large texture. I would want to make, find one that fits it a little bit more. But I'm dealing with texture now, further than base color. Okay, so let me go through it one more time. Let's say, we'll just grab a sphere. I'm going to right mouse click and hold, assign new material. Decide if I want it shiny or matte. Let's do shiny this time. I'm going to hit the checker box next to color, and I'm going to go to File. If you want to play around with some of the options, Maya does have some that are defaulted in here. Generally with, portfolio pieces, you'd want to insert your own texture, but because this is a modeling texture, you can see if you like any of these. So for instance, let's do marble. And now I have my texture. Let me put this over here. And it's always nice to do a render. And I'm just going to use Maya software for this. All right. So you can always play around with those default textures, but again, to add your file, right mouse click, assign new material, Blinn or Lambert, checker box next to color, file, navigate to your file. We'll just see some of this grass here. And there we go. We've got some base texture on our sphere. So the reason why I said to put texture on your hard surface and not maybe your organic is sometimes your organic is going to be more difficult because it's going to have more smooth intricacies. That being said, you could pick kind of a tileable texture and give it a shot with an automatic UV. You know, and don't forget that we can split things up. So let's say I go into face mode. And let me make sure I got all of them. Assign new material. And let's do brick. So you can have multiple textures. Notice the highlight from the Blinn to the Lambert goes away. But you can place textures in specific spots. So if you wanted to have, let's say for some reason these were eyes of my organic object, I could select these, assign new material, let's make them shiny, and I could make them black. Okay, so you know we will go in a little bit further and we can kind of clean some of these things up, but I just want you to add base bitmap textures and do the best you can. Your grade will be on the modeling and the written paragraph and did you attempt to put on a bitmap. But I understand that this is a large topic that I kind of rushed through a little bit. So do the best you can and feel free to reach out with any questions. Have a good week.